Coming up on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast, an update from Tony Haskel, whose bout with cardiac sarcoidosis has gotten worse.
After the rapid heart rate. So what I was diagnosed with, which is, I guess, I learned at that time, was a common complication with Sarc, where it's ventricular tachycardia.
Tony first appeared on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast in March of 2023. At the time, he had been diagnosed but was experiencing few difficulties. Well, that changed.
I'll say this more soberly now, is that I don't know, what 6 months from now will look like, or a year from now will look like, whether I'll ever be back to where I was before. But that was in the past anyway. Now I'm just dealing with the future, and my outlook is to live as healthy as possible.
Coming up, the latest from Tony and a report that says death rates for people waiting for a lung transplant with sarcoidosis are higher than other people with different diseases.
This is the Sarc Fighter podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hello and welcome. This is episode 94 of the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin. I want to remind you that Kinevant Sciences is researching a potential new drug for sarcoidosis. It's called nivolumab, which inhibits one of the key proteins believed to be responsible for granuloma formation and persistence in sarcoidosis. I invite you to listen to episode 69 of the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast, where Kinevant CEO Bill Gerhardt and the Director of Patient Advocacy Randy Rogers join me to discuss the status of nivolumab, but also tell you how you, as a sarcoidosis patient, can participate in their Phase 2 clinical trial called Resolve Lung. And there's a link in the show notes. All right, I'm recording this podcast on August 14th of 2023, so summer is cruising right along. I hope you're having a great summer. Mine's been good for sure, and I am headed to our family cabin on Lake Champlain for a week soon, so I'll be sure to let you know if I catch any fish. I'm just sure that you're on pins and needles, and you won't be able to rest until you find out how many and how big the fish are that I catch. But I intend to spend a great deal of time fishing, and even if you're not on pins and needles, I am, because I'm anticipating how good or bad the fishing might be. Now, I'm also looking forward to a couple of other things. I used to get up to our cabin where our family has had this place since I was in grade school. So let's say going on 5 decades. There was a time when I was up there and all I wanted to do was water ski and see if I could do the latest thing. And I eventually learned to slalom ski, ski on one. And I wanted to jump the wake. I wanted to cut harder. I wanted to, do all these things that guys in their teens and 20s like to do. But now, other than the fishing, I think I'm probably looking forward to the bonfire in the evening. So our cabin, or camp, if you will, is right on the shore of Lake Champlain, and the shore there is rocky. It's sort of it's very smooth, small pieces of shale that have been worn down by the water over time. So these are like rocks that you would pick up, and they're perfect for skipping on the water, right? But it's not a sandy beach. It's sort of a rocky beach with clay underneath all these rocks. But it's a perfect place to have a very nice, safe bonfire with the driftwood and so forth. And we've actually constructed a little handmade fire pit with rocks all around it, right on the edge of our lawn, where the lawn meets a seawall that then goes down to the beach. And the seawall is just made up of big boulders. It's not like a nicely made seawall. And most people don't do that on this lake because the weather, and in particular the ice, is so bad in the winter, and the ice just expands up onto the land or next to the land, and it just rips up anything that you have there. So you can't leave your dock in the water. Nobody does. Everybody has a removable or a floating dock. And anyway, so it's rough and beautiful all at the same time. And I'm just looking forward to sitting out there in the Adirondack chair with a cold beer, hopefully after having caught some fish or ridden my bike, and with my wife and I and a couple of friends. I think my mom and dad, who are in their late 80s, are going to visit for a couple of days. So I'm just looking forward to that. Just a mellow time, and it's just a new way of kind of looking forward to my week in Vermont. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to go up and hopefully spend a night in Burlington, beautiful little city, Burlington, Vermont, which is one of my favorite cities in the world. It's got beautiful rail trails. They've got a thing there called Church Street, which is this just open boulevard with stores, and they're kind of funky, kitschy, and outdoor stores and restaurants. There's no cars allowed on this street. It's just for walking only, but there's street performers that are good. I mean, really, you want to stop and watch them. And of course, I like all the outdoor stuff, and they sell kayaks, and not that I'm going to buy a new kayak, but I like to go in and look at them, and stand-up paddle boards, which I don't have the balance to do anymore. Thank you, sarcoidosis. And, just hiking shorts and gear, and there's a beautiful bike shop there, 2 or 3 actually, beautiful bike shops. And it's just fun to do the walk and sit in an outdoor cafe and have lunch and that sort of thing. So that is really, really fun. And then there's something there called the Causeway, which goes out into the middle of Lake Champlain. And so you're riding on this causeway. It's an old abandoned railroad line, but on either side of you, literally maybe 20 feet on either side of you, is the lake. So you're riding, and it's just gorgeous with Lake Champlain on either side of you. And then you get to the end of this because they had to create a gap so boats could go up and down Lake Champlain. So there's a gap of several hundred yards where the boats go through, and you can get a ticket for what they call the bike ferry, and they'll take you across that 200 or 300 yards with your bicycle, and then you resume on the causeway on the other side of this gap, and you can go up into these islands, these big islands that are, big enough that they have farms and stores and little villages. And so the lower island is called South Hero. So we want to ride our bikes and do that ride across the gap, and then ride up into South Hero, and then go back. So that I'm really looking forward to that. But that's very mellow bike riding. It's kind of sit up and look around bike riding. And so I'm looking forward to riding the causeway. And once we're done with the bike rides, maybe we'll go back into town, visit a brewery or two, and all of that. And then we'll just head on back to our cabin, which is only about, give or take, and it looks like it's 45 minutes, but with traffic, it's an hour. Go back to the cabin and enjoy a couple more days, and maybe catch another fish. And the other thing up on Lake Champlain you have to worry about is the weather, because it gets windy and it gets whitecaps on it, and that's no fun for outdoor activity in the lake. And as fall starts to come, then the lake can get really, really rough this time of year. But we'll find something to do, and it'll be great. And I'm looking forward to getting away from what's been kind of a stressful summer in the TV newsroom where I work. I just think it's funny that, in 2019, I was emerging from a couple of tough years with my neurosarcoidosis, and I wasn't sure if these kinds of days and these types of vacations would ever return. And now that they have, I just want to say how that I am extremely fortunate, and I do not take them for granted. I don't take my health for granted. And I always said, if I ever got healthy again, knock on wood, that I would really sort of double down on realizing how lucky and fortunate I am to be able to do these types of things and live that life. So speaking of that, I want to share with you some information that Sarcoidosis News is reporting. And this is another post written by Marissa Wexler. And in essence, it says that sarcoidosis patients with pulmonary sarc are being passed over for lung transplants compared to patients with other different diseases. And I want to just hit some high points on this report, again from Sarcoidosis News and reporter Marissa Wexler. So here's what it says. And again, this just came out. I received this email this morning. You can subscribe to Sarcoidosis News. It's free. But it says death rates while waiting for a lung transplant are disproportionately higher among people with pulmonary sarcoidosis than for those with other lung disorders. And this is according to a U.S. study. And then there's a quote I'll read to you. It says, our research shows that further consideration needs to be given to how we classify patients with sarcoidosis and how we calculate their risk of dying on the wait list. Researchers wrote this in a study called Sarcoidosis Lung Transplantation Waitlist Mortality, a National Registry Database study, which was originally published in ERJ Open Research. And so what I'll do is I will post a link to all of this in the show notes. But again, I want to give full credit to Sarcoidosis News to reporting this. I'll give you just a little bit more background. There's something called the Lung Allocation Score, or LAS, and that's been used since 2005. And essentially, that is how they figure out who gets the priority for a lung transplant. And it was designed based on common lung diseases like idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD. You've probably heard of that. And the first one is called IPF. But COPD, you hear a lot about these days. Well, after they put that system into place, the number of patients with those illnesses who died while waiting for a lung transplant dropped, which is good news, right? But despite these well-established benefits for IPF and COPD, the story reads, the LAS may not be as effective for prioritizing lung transplant in people with pulmonary sarcoidosis. So currently, the LAS divides pulmonary sarcoidosis patients based on the presence of high blood pressure in the lungs, which is known as pulmonary hypertension, and that's a well-established risk factor for having worse lung disease. And essentially, and I'm not going to continue to read this to you because I think you get, once they get down, they get very granular here, but the more they look at it, the more they realize that they might have to reevaluate the way that people with pulmonary sarcoidosis are evaluated, that they may be getting tossed out of the prioritization process in order to get a lung transplant, and so mortality rates are higher than maybe they should be for people with sarcoidosis. So I thought that was interesting, and I don't like to, as a reporter, I don't like to take somebody else's work and just read it to you verbatim. I want to make sure I give them ample credit and to share a link to their work. And I simply don't have the time for the most part to do primary reporting. I wish I did on what's going on in the world of sarcoidosis, but right now I have to look at these other sources and then just be a conduit to pass that along to you. And of course, I do have an opportunity to interview lots of researchers, and I would consider that to a certain extent primary reporting, but it's not like I'm getting detailed down into these stories. What I want to do is I want to find them, tell you about them, and let you read them at your leisure. And I feel like this one is definitely worthy of it, especially since when you look at the fact that most people who have sarcoidosis have pulmonary sarc, and that may be something that is relevant to you. So now I want to play a brief clip of my original interview with Tony Haskel. And he first reached out to me earlier this year when there was a possibility that he and I would join another guest, Royce Robertson, for a fundraising bike ride. And I've talked a lot about that on the podcast. And at the time, Tony knew he had cardiac sarcoidosis, but it wasn't slowing him down much. Here's what he said. And so how has sarcoidosis impacted your daily life with family, siblings, whatever? How has it changed what you're up against?
It really hasn't impacted me yet. I think when I had to explain everything to my family, obviously they were concerned. It's not the easiest thing to explain to someone because I'm still searching for answers. I don't have all the answers. It's going to be an ongoing, thing where I'm going to have to deal with. And there's going to be, again, just learning as much as I can. There's going to be some twists and turns in the road. I don't think this is something that's ever going to 100% go away. Hopefully it goes in recession and I can forget about it, but I don't think it's 100% going away. So in that regard, just explaining it to friends and family has been a challenge just to have everyone kind of get their arms around it. But in terms of my daily life, aside from just feeling a little bit fatigued and maybe just a little bit out of breath sometimes, hasn't really affected me yet.
Well, Tony and I have stayed in touch, and his situation has gotten worse. In fact, only recently did doctors even clear him to ride an indoor bike, and even then only very lightly. And he is now doing short rides in the gym, and he's fundraising for FSR. So coming up, I want to ask Tony how things went from being okay to not so good, and my interview with Tony is coming up next on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter podcast. Welcome back to the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. Joining me now is Tony Haskel, his second appearance on the Sarc Fighter podcast. Tony, welcome.
Thank you, John. It's good to be back.
So the last time we spoke, you had been diagnosed with cardiac sarc, but you weren't feeling too bad. And then since then, things have gone downhill a little bit. Why don't you bring everybody up to speed?
Well, thank you again. And I don't know if it's gone downhill. I think the right term for me, at least, would be I was a little bit naive when we last spoke in mid-March, exactly what it was. And I think the actual day that we spoke, I had scheduled my next PET scan for the end of April.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to revert back, I had been diagnosed with Sarc at the third week in September and immediately had a procedure for a defibrillator pacemaker. And then starting in January, got put on several different drugs to combat everything, including prednisone. So, when I spoke to you, I was, that was right in the middle of the first quarter or the end of the first quarter. And I was getting all juiced up because I felt like I was in the gym working out. And, it was getting a little bit warmer after a long winter, and I was ready to go hop on the bike and resume normal activities. And literally what happened was, I'd say in mid-April, I only took 2 outdoor bike rides. The first one, my heart rate went up to about 185. And then on the second one, I was up in Massachusetts riding with a friend on a simple 25-mile or thereabout ride. And about literally 5-10 minutes into the ride, I It was up in Concord, Mass, and told her like we got to pull over for a second. My heart rate's up at 205,
Ooh.
and so that was a little scary. And then soon thereafter, I had my PET scan, and then as you're aware, it's about 3 days later I wanted to go see my cardiologist, and the news wasn't good, and I wasn't expecting good news after the the rapid heart rate. So what I was diagnosed with, which is, I guess, I learned at that time, was a common complication with Sarc, where it's ventricular tachycardia, which is very rapid heart rate, which can be dangerous. So for the time being, they banned me from doing anything where where I would get, really into heavy cardio. No elliptical, no indoor bike, no outdoor bike, of course, nothing of that. And then they cranked up the prednisone. At the highest level in the first quarter, I had been at, I think, either 40 or 50 milligrams. And now they cranked it up to 100 milligrams. And
Wow.
I wasn't really too much affected when they had those lower doses. But I can tell you, once the 100 milligrams kicked in, I was not a happy camper.
Yeah. So while you're the first person I've talked to who's taking a higher dose of prednisone than me, because I was at 80. So
Right.
100.
Yeah.
100. So weight gain, yes.
Yeah. I think, what I noticed first and foremost was, listen, I'd put on weight since this whole thing started. So the weight gain, but also just the loss in muscle tone. And I looked at my quads, and they were like half the size of what they were. And it was interesting. I noticed it mostly when I go in the city. I live outside New York City, and it's hybrid. So I'd go in the city every Wednesday and Thursday, and just to get some exercise, I'd take an early train in. I'd get into Grand Central, and then I'd walk from Grand Central down to the World Trade Center, which is just about a 3-mile walk. And I would do this every day up until just recently, because it's just too hot. But I noticed that I was kind of like dragging and really tired on these walks after they started putting me on the 100 milligrams of prednisone. It was just like a fatigue and loss of strength, certainly in my lower legs and certainly in my upper body as well. And still not to where I was before, but hopefully that'll get better.
Well, so a 3-mile walk is not something that a lot of people would undertake regularly, unless you're a hiker or you walk for fitness, but you just did it to just to kind of part of your transportation and build some fitness into that as well. So were you able to walk without jacking your heart rate like you did on your bike ride, or how did that work out?
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing maybe anywhere from 15 to 18 miles per
minute or per
minute,
hour?
or per hour. Yeah. So, these aren't, I wasn't trying to like run or anything like that. I'm just trying to stay active. And, I do a lot of, every day I'll do, depending upon the day, if I'm not doing other sort of, weightlifting or now indoor bike, I'll do anywhere from 3 to 6 miles a day. And so that wasn't a big deal. But what I'm saying is that I definitely felt it more. I was more fatigued and tired, and just again, my strength had been sapped. And I know, if you talk to family and friends, I was more irritable and insomnia and all the other 9 yards that go along with the after effects of prednisone.
Yeah, prednisone. And how was your attitude around other people? Did you have a short fuse by any chance?
I would say, yeah. I counted a few instances where, I was definitely my irritation button was quick, and but it is. I warned people, so they knew it was coming. But yeah, and also just emotional. It was kind of weird. You're going through this and you hear a song or some story or whatever. And for whatever reason, I just got more emotional than I would normally do. It was kind of strange. But
that's consistent with everything I've heard and or felt about the prednisone. But the good news is that you are very close to being off prednisone, right?
I am. So I haven't lost the optimism that I had when we first spoke. I don't know, I'll say this more soberly now is that I don't know, what 6 months from now will look like or a year from now will look like, whether I'll ever be back to where I was before, but that was in the past anyway. Now I'm just dealing with the future. And my outlook is to live as healthy as possible. They don't want me in high altitude yet, so that might affect my out west skiing plans. But I could get good news if everything goes well in the next 3 months, and that might change as well. So one day at a time.
So let's back up just a little bit. So you discovered that things were not going well. You had your CAT scan, and they put you on prednisone and some other medications, which, feel free to mention those. And since then, they initially had told you, don't do anything that would jack your heart rate. Don't ride your bicycle. Don't ride an indoor bike. Don't do any of those things. Can you fill us in on how that all evolved?
Well, let me skate backwards. So I had the procedure with the defibrillator pacemaker in end of September of last year. And then, I guess for 2-3 weeks, they don't want you really doing anything because they want that thing to settle into your, right underneath your collarbone. And then, I was free to go at it. And I did go at it, building up my strength and my cardio again until all this transpired in April, mid-April with the ventricular tachycardia. So, nothing changed until right then. Then I couldn't do anything cardio-wise. I could still do, lightweight weightlifting, and I could walk. I felt like Forrest Gump. I was walking everywhere. I mean, it was, but it wasn't high cardio. So that's the only thing that changed, really.
Okay, so the only thing that changed was the fact that you couldn't go and do the more difficult things that you enjoy doing.
Right.
And you and I have talked from before and gotten to know each other kind of well through email exchanges and so forth. That you like to ski,
Right.
You ride your bike, you've got a family place in southern Vermont, and
Right.
and you work out a lot. So, and you live in Connecticut, so you're doing a lot of stuff, all this walking in the city and everything. It's got to be frustrating not to be able to do what you're used to doing.
I hear you, John. I see you on Strava and you're having a great time on the bike, and I see all my friends doing, their thing between 50 to 100-mile rides and, beautiful scenery. So in that, I mean, is it frustrating that way? Yes, I guess it is. But I really take the attitude of it is what it is. And as I think I've told you, I recently or just recently finished a fundraiser for Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. And so it was, 5+ hours of staring at myself in the mirror in the gym while pedaling away on an indoor bike, which is, I have a face for radio. That's why there's a podcast. But it is what it is. Like I could, we've talked before. I could be a glass half empty and be like, oh, pity me, I can't be out there on the bike this summer. Or I could be like, there's a lot of people with worse stuff than me right now. So it just is what it is. You just got to deal with it.
Well, that's a great attitude to have. So, all right, let's talk about your fundraiser. You said you just finished it. You'd still take donations, would you not?
Of course, when I say finished it, my rides have been finished, but I'm in sales, so nothing's ever finished.
Right.
So, or in fundraising and sales, the window is always still open. So,
yeah.
And proceeds have still been coming in over the past couple of days. So I've been really heartwarmed by the response from my family and friends. We're over, I think we're about $7,300 right now, and
awesome.
That's I couldn't be more pleased and blessed with the network of family and friends that I have. So it was as I said, I think these rides, as you know, you've done the indoor bike. I think
Mm-hmm.
they're harder than the outdoor bike,
Mm-hmm.
not in the sense of obviously on the outdoor bike, you have, wind and other variables that you're dealing with. But the indoor bike, there's no let up. You're constantly going. You're not coasting down anything. You're not, you can't lay off. You're constantly pedaling. And again, it's kind of boring. There's no scenery or people to talk with. So.
Yeah, why you said you listen to podcasts. I highly recommend this one. That'll get you through the first 50 minutes to an hour, typically. We have not talked. Would you just tell people what you do in the city? You mentioned you're in sales and you're doing this sounds like a glamorous walk down to just tell us about that.
Well, I've been in the media business my entire career, predominantly in business as well as sports. So I did a stint in Men's Journal magazine when they launched way back in the early 90s, and also at Ski and Warren Miller back in about 15 years ago, or a little less than 15 years ago, but predominantly in the business sector with the likes of Fortune, Bloomberg, Money Magazine when it was around. And now I'm at a wonderful brand, Inc. Magazine, or Inc. Business Media, and for not so much in print anymore. It's a full channel, faceted, full circle of digital, print, live events, podcasts, etc. So just been in the media business on the business side of it, in sales and partnerships.
Yeah. So when you go to work day to day, your job is to do what? Are you selling advertising, or are you working on mergers? What exactly are you doing? How does it work?
I'm not an M&A. I'm on the advertising sales. So it's partnerships. So for example, if we have a podcast, which we do. I mean, we have all different things that we on the editorial side, much like in your day job.
Mm-hmm.
We derive the revenue so we can create all this wonderful content and serve it out to our audience of small business owners, entrepreneurs, etc. And so that's what I've been doing throughout my career.
Has the sarcoidosis hindered your ability to go to work and accomplish those things?
It hasn't. I mean, maybe some fatigue in the afternoon, but I've really fought hard against that. And so I don't think it's affected it too much in terms of really getting in the way. I mean, I've had to take some time here or there in the mornings or whatever it might be for doctor appointments, but other than that, no.
I found that my attitude changed a little bit, and I've heard other people say that here on the podcast that we've talked with, that maybe they just weren't as anxious to take on like the extra project, that work wasn't quite as important. There's this big word out there that has nothing to do with sarcoidosis called quiet quitting, where people just sort of back off, but they stay in place at work. And that's sort of a post-pandemic thing. So I don't want to suggest that at all, but people have said, yeah, I could continue to work, but I wasn't the aggressive worker maybe that I was. And I don't want you to out yourself here in front of your colleagues or anything. I'm just wondering if you felt that way.
I don't think so. I think, I'm still, I joined Inc. in early to mid-December of last year.
Okay.
And I haven't been I've been the publisher of a magazine and in management. And I've obviously, at the beginning of my career, I was individual contributor. And right now I'm an individual contributor. And so I had a lot to learn coming in this job, and I still do, in terms of all the different facets that we have to offer a marketing partner, and particularly in the digital outset. So I've been kind of, what's the term? With the fire hose, just trying to take that all in and absorb as much as possible. So I don't have the luxury of stepping back, at least in the certain role that I'm in the timing that I've had. So I haven't had that same experience, but I do hear what you're saying, because sometimes with all this going on, you're going to doctor's appointments, you're all the body changes with the drugs and stuff like that. You might just want to take a back seat, but I haven't experienced that as much as perhaps others might have.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I guess when you take on that job, right there in the midst of all of this, you know, you don't have any choice. You've got to go. You know,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and do you work in a high rise?
I'm on the 29th floor. I'm literally, I can throw a football 30 yards to the World Trade Center. So I'm in 7 World Trade Center.
Wow, that's awesome.
And our sister brand is Fast Company. So 2 sexy brands to any listeners out there that are marketing directors or chief marketing officers.
Yeah. Those are cool brands. I'll tell you what. Yeah, I'm envious of all those, you know, cool things that you're doing over there.
It's fun. It's fun, especially in this, you know, the small business operators. I've worked for the likes of Fortune, which was a great experience also, but those are obviously very large companies. When you're working with small business owners, it really gets personal, and you know, just some fantastic stories of their challenges and their opportunities and how they've kind of grinded through to get where they are. It's a fun brand.
All right, let's go back to your fundraiser. Since you're in sales and all of that, and you've got the cool office on the, did you say 29th floor or 27th floor?
29th floor.
Okay, that's awesome. Great. We don't in Roanoke, Virginia, where I live, we don't have any buildings with 29 floors. I think the tallest one is maybe 17. So 29th floor sounds, I know in New York that's not tall. That's not that high compared to what it could be, but still that's really awesome. So you originally, and you and Royce Robertson and I had talked about, at Royce's behest, doing a bike ride. And Royce, I believe, wound up doing it. As of the time I'm talking right now, I don't know his status. Maybe you can update us if you've talked to him. He was going to do a bike ride, and we thought we might do it together. And then there was smoke from the Canadian wildfires, and then you got sick, and Royce's schedule and mine didn't pan out. So first of all, you decided, okay, well, I got cleared to do the indoor bike. How far did you ride on an indoor bicycle, which I can tell people is nauseatingly boring?
Well, let me step back. I was like you. I had a scheduling conflict with Royce, so I couldn't do his ride originally anyways.
All right.
I think they're still in the midst of it. I haven't talked to him, but I've just been following him on Instagram. So I think they're either just ended or still in the midst of it. But that was this past weekend, so he's been on his. And then mine, with COVID, you saw a lot of charity rides that, since people couldn't do it in person, they did a lot of hybrid or virtual, where, you know, wherever you're living, you could still fundraise. You just do a ride wherever you are. And so I just decided with this, since I couldn't ride outside, I'll do 100 miles indoors. And I figured, given where I am, you know, cardiovascularly, and I'm still doing okay. Probably not like, you know, a year and a half ago, but I figured I could do 100 miles within 5 to 6 rides, which is exactly what I did. So I did 6 rides. I think 2 of them were an hour, and 4 of them were about 45 minutes, and, you know, cranking out around, you know, a little bit over 19 miles per hour. So, you know, it was 100 miles broken up into 6 rides.
19 miles an hour is fast. I mean, how was your heart rate for that?
Well, I think my heart rate is artificially low due to the sarcoid and the defibrillator pacemaker. Okay. So sure. It ranges anywhere from 105 to, I think the highest it was 129, which, you know, if you're doing if all of this wasn't happening and it was 2 years ago, it would probably, for an outdoor ride, range, you know, about 125 to 130 with a high of maybe 160 if I'm climbing mountains and stuff. This is, of course, outdoors. So I you know, again, when you and I spoke, if you recall, you know, part of the issues was when before I was diagnosed, I was wearing an Apple Watch and all the metrics on my Garmin bike, and, you know, my resting heart rate was down around 30, which is really low. Now with the pacemaker defibrillator, there's a basement of 50. So, you know, when I'm on the bike, unless something goes wrong with the ventricular tachycardia, I'm usually lower than I was before all this.
Because your resting heart rate was around 30.
Yeah.
That's like pro athlete resting heart rate.
Yeah, except I'm not a pro athlete, and then there's a problem with a 30 resting heart rate, and that's why they weren't messing around. They wanted me in there. They were a little shocked that I was still standing.
Yeah.
It went down to about 27. The night before I had the procedure, so they were concerned. But what they were shocked about is that I was talking to them like I'm talking to you right now. Which I was fortunate. I was in pretty good shape when all this went down, so I think that helped me. But again, that's a very, very low heart rate that they had to, obviously they need to do something to fix, which they did.
So, what is the path forward for you now? So they put you on the prednisone. So they're trying to knock this thing down to get the inflammation out of your system. They will try to maintain it with some other drugs. Can you share what those drugs are?
Sure. I'm on Metropolo, which is basically they give you that after someone that would have a heart transplant. Obviously, I haven't had a heart transplant, but it's really for, to protect everything after a surgery, or, to protect the immune system. And then I'm also on Cellcept, Entresto, and Fosamax. So that combination is there just to protect me as I kind of go through this.
Gotcha. So for you next, you start to crawl out of this sort of safety zone you've been in with prednisone, as bad as it is. And what happens next?
Well, the way I look at it is that I'm taking the good news and running with it, but I'm not going to be an idiot. I will, if something looks abnormal, and also, they can see there's a monitor that I keep by my bed that is constantly taking data from the pacemaker. And so if the heart rate jumps considerably, then they'll know. And I have a checkup in October. That I'm sure I'll get another PET scan in October too, and they'll take a look. So my goal right now is to make sure the inflammation reduction stays that way, and obviously the prednisone did its job when they cranked it up there, and hopefully it just stays in remission, and I go from there, just one step at a time. Where I get back into, hopefully I can lose some of the weight that I gained. I can, get even stronger cardiovascularly, and life goes on, and we go from there. That's my goal. No more, no less than that.
Have you changed diet any? What you eat?
I should have. Not really. I still have a pretty big sweet tooth. I'm trying to, not that I'm a big drinker, but I enjoy red wine and and the occasional bourbon here and there. I'm thinking of even cutting all that out. I find that, I don't know whether it's because of the drugs I've been taking or just age, that even a glass of red wine, I just won't feel that great in the morning. So I'm kind of thinking of just cutting everything out at the moment, just to get a fresh path forward.
Well, I know that I was looking at everything when I was in your position, where I had this big flare and we had to get it under control. And I just felt as if I need to do everything on my side of the medicine that I could fix. Once I would have been able to work out again, to work out, to be fit, to eat healthier, I went on something called the elimination diet and talked about that a lot. And worked with the dietitian, who I'll put her link in the show notes, Lindsay Norenberg, Nourished by Lindsay. And you can find her on the internet, and she helped me out a lot. And I do feel like that helped. Doctors kept telling me, yeah, your diet's not going to matter. But I felt like, there are certain inflammatory foods that you can or cannot eat if you can make a choice. Yeah. Why eat something that is inflammatory when what you're trying to beat essentially is inflammation? I
agree with you, John. I mean, I've unfortunately been through a lot of surgeries, from back surgery, from a mountain biking accident to torn ACLs 10 years apart, different knees, skiing, and then a biking accident in 2019. And, particularly with the back surgery, I found that I went through regular physical therapy with that, but really helped the most was acupuncture. And I still, whenever I have a flare up with the back, I go back to the acupuncturist, and thankfully I've been able to find some good ones all around the country wherever I've lived. And to get to your point, from acupuncture to diet, I think half the battle is mental, emotional. If it makes you feel better, then maybe it will make you better. So I think if there's some steps I can take and that I will, from doing the best I can diet. I'm not gonna, if I want a chocolate cookie, I'm gonna have a chocolate chip cookie, but I'm just gonna try to reduce the amount of that. In terms of limiting other stuff like wine or alcohol, that's a pretty simple step that I can take that will just make me feel better. And again, easier to get to the gym and do the things I like to do.
So what do your doctors think? Because the thing about sarcoidosis is that it doesn't always just go away. I mean, they hit it hard. They've hit you hard. You've got some other sort of maintenance drugs. What are they telling you that they think your prognosis is?
From the first time I've gotten this, that I think they've been hesitant to give me what their prognosis is, because I think they've been very honest with me in terms of, as you know, there is no cure for this. That's why they give you the prednisone. And it's not, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of research and people looking into this, but there is no magic bullet for this. So I think they've been hesitant. I think they've taken the same attitude I have. They're just going to watch me closely, and they're going to hope it goes in remission, that it looks like it has gone in remission now, but they're going to watch me very closely. I know the electrologist is concerned about bike riding, to get that heart rate high. But my cardiologist seems pretty comfortable with me doing that as long as there's no hiccups. And that's really it right now. I think these are short steps for me right now. I'm going to take this and run with it, but then I'm going to have the checkup and PET scan in October. And if it's still all good, then we'll do several more. And the more where there's no problems, the better. And hopefully I resume, everything. What I don't know is I don't know if there's been permanent damage caused by it. And I suspect there has been. I just don't know how much. And that for me is something I'll want to know moving forward.
Yeah. So you're kind of on the precipice of finding out that kind of stuff. And all you can do is sort of, I guess, creep forward. Is that a good way to put it, in terms of getting a little bit more aggressive, and waiting to see what happens?
Yeah. I mean, I think, with where I am right now in terms of I don't, nothing's changed in my daily life in terms of how I wake up and, interact and socialize and anything like that. And especially now that I'm off the prednisone, I think that'll be easier. But in terms of okay, can I go plan a ski trip out west? Will they ever allow me to go back on the outdoor bike? And even if they do, I want to. I'll cross that bridge when it comes. I'm not going to rush that. Unlike the other injuries, this is not something where you just have surgery, rehab, and you're thrown back out there. This is the heart, so I can't really mess with that.
And that's the thing. You come back from these operations and it's just a matter of getting over the operation. But in this case, you've got to get over something that wants to potentially stick around. And it's not like 2 weeks later, if you're just really diligent, you'll heal.
Right. Yeah, this is different. It's certainly been a bizarre and challenging year, given that, a year ago, I had no idea what was going on with me. I knew something was wrong because, as we had spoken about in the previous podcast, I was looking at the data on my Garmin. I was like, gosh, I'm fatigued. My numbers aren't as strong on these same routes that I've been doing. My heart rate is, in the 30s. I thought I had long COVID, or maybe I had long COVID, or I actually never had COVID. So I didn't know what I had. And so until I was fully diagnosed, in some respects, as a relief, it was like, all right, I'm not really out of shape, but there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
So, it's been an interesting year of learning and just coming to grips with something that I have to deal with, much like everyone probably has to deal with something in their life that throws them a curveball.
So how do people contribute if they still want to make a donation to your indoor bike riding effort?
Well, if you can put the link on the show notes, that'd be great. But I believe that if you go to the FSR website, there's a way where not just myself, but others who are doing fundraisers, you can find them as well. Perhaps we can do a little bit of investigation to find that link as well and put it on the show notes. But the phone lines, as Jerry Lewis would say, are still open, or website in this case, and any contributions would be dearly appreciated.
Yeah, I will have made one by the time anybody hears this. And the only reason I haven't is because I keep forgetting. I get distracted. I pick up my phone. I've got a text. Oh no, and then I didn't do it. But well, thank you for doing that. That's a lot of money to raise, and hopefully people who are listening will add a little bit more to the pot. And you do go to the FSR website and you just search for KISS, which is Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis, and scroll down. You'll see Tony's fundraising campaign, but also I will make it easy for you by putting a link in the show notes. Tony, thank you so much for joining me. Good luck to you as you go forward, and let's hope that this is the end of your bout with sarcoidosis, and next year at this time maybe we can do that bike ride.
John, I appreciate it. If there's been any type of upside to this diagnosis, it's been meeting all the wonderful people at FSR, including yourself, which is my first touch point in terms of meeting the community. So I couldn't be more thankful in terms of the new friends I've met and the connections I've made. So thank you for having me back on again as a repeat. And if anyone out there would like to talk about it, which is always helpful sometimes, because that's what I did with several of your guests after listening to the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me.
So I'll put your email in the show notes as well.
That'd be great.
Okay. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, John.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Well, I was very sorry to hear that Tony's health had gone south on him, but hopefully he'll be able to continue on the road to recovery. And don't forget, he is fundraising. There is a link to his KISS account in the show notes. And so please join me in making a donation to help in the fight against sarcoidosis. Now, I just want to remind you, the official Sarc Fighter song is called Zombie by Mark Steyer, who plays in a band called the White Hot Lizards in Canada. You can hear Mark's story, which is the story behind those lyrics, which really kind of nail it, back in episode 12. I release this podcast every other Monday, and as I'm speaking today, let me check. Yes, there he is. My trusty dog, Dougal, my rescue boxer, is curled up on the chair in my office, and Dougal makes my life so much better. He's not even looking at me to wonder why I'm saying his name. He's just conked out. The backstory to the founding of the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research is episode 11 with Andrea and Redding Wilson. Don't forget to follow the Sarc Fighter on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I even have a Peloton account as Sarc Fighter if you have an indoor bike called a Peloton. And my cycling blog, Carlin the Cyclist, has a section called Cycling with Sarcoidosis. Also, if you're new here and just trying to figure out what Sarc is, try listening to episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart. Think of that as Sarcoidosis 101. Just like, what is going on with sarcoidosis? How does it work? What do we know about how it starts in your body? And why does it start to the extent that we know? All of that is back in episode 2. My story is episode 1, and if you'd like to send me an email, it's in the show notes. It helps me reach more people and grow the show. If you share it on your social media. And if you like it, I think what really helps the show and helps the cause is just tell one other person in the sarcoidosis space, your doctor, your nurse, somebody that you work with, somebody else in the sarcoidosis space. Just say, hey, have you listened to the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast? A lot of good information in there. I do appreciate that. So other than that, please just subscribe and give the show a nice review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your downloads. And until next time, keep fighting.
Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking.